Welcome to the Remnant Trust at IPFW. The Remnant Trust is a private foundation located in Jeffersonville, Indiana. They own over 900 first and early edition significant historical works. We're lucky enough to have 53 of those works here on campus, along with 2 of our own from the IPFW Helmke Library. I'm Dr. Pat Ashton. I teach sociology and peace and conflict studies here at IPFW. I've studied these works, taught about them for many years, but I've also recently researched the particular stories behind these books. I'd like to share those with you. Let's take a look together at the Remnant Trust at IPFW. Another of our themes in the Remnant Trust is advancing the rights of humanity. In this section, we have works that have articulated, advocated, and advanced the rights that we cherish as Americans. First document I'd like to tell you about is the Magna Carta, the foundation of English common law and our own constitutional and legal system. Now, this is not the original Magna Carta, although this is an early edition, 1576. You may know that the Magna Carta was signed in 1215. King John, the King of England at the time, was squeezing the nobility with taxes for his many speculative wars and other adventures. The nobility was very upset. They fought back, and on the field of Runnymede in 1215, they forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. What was in it? First of all, the idea that only Parliament could levy taxes. The king could not do it, only the people's legislative body. But perhaps even more importantly, it announced for the first time the right to trial by jury of your peers and the right to habeas corpus. Habeas corpus, the Latin phrase meaning you may have the body. It's the legal principle that says if the police or the authorities cannot charge you with the crime, after you've been arrested, they have to let you go. This is a principle that has existed in our legal system from 1215 till this very day. And it's embodied here in the Magna Carta, which is why the British wanted to be sure they reprinted the Magna Carta. It was important that people have access to it, that they know what it said. So this particular version was published in 1576. The first part of it is in Latin, and the second part is in English, printed in Old English style. People often ask me as they come through the exhibit, why is the book so small? Well, think about it. First of all, it's a controversial document. Not all the monarchs were very happy with the rights that were articulated in this document. So a small book like this could be easily hidden in a pocket. What Magna Carta? I don't know what you're talking about. But also, paper was very expensive. So this parchment paper that it was printed on would be very expensive, and they could save money by making it small. So for both those reasons, this book is very small. We have another series of very small first edition books right next to it. These are Cato's Letters. Perhaps less familiar to an American audience, but they were not unfamiliar to our founding fathers. These books compiled letters that were written to English newspapers by 2 gentlemen named John Trenchard and Thomas Gordon. They wrote under the pen name of Cato, a famous orator who advocated for freedom and independence. And in these letters, they articulated the notion that people should have a right to own private property, and they should be secure in the ownership of that property, and that the role of government was to protect that right. This was obviously very influential on the founders of this country, who wrote some of these principles into our Constitution. On the wall, we have the New York Times from Tuesday, September 23rd, 1862. Now, a lot of times people think politics was just invented yesterday, and some of the things that happen are brand new. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're very old. You might remember that the Emancipation Proclamation became official on January 1st, 1863, when Lincoln signed it. This is a paper from 1862, September. What happened is Lincoln put out a trial balloon, as we would call it today. He released the Emancipation Proclamation saying, if the South doesn't give up, I will promulgate this on January 1st, 1863, and all the slaves in the states that are rebelling, not all the slaves in all the states, the border states were exempted, but all the states that are in active rebellion against the United States will be freed. Of course, they remained in active rebellion, and on January 1st, 1863, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Why did he release it in September 1862? Because the Union had finally won a victory. Before that, Robert E. Lee had defeated the Union Army consistently, but finally at Antietam, Maryland, the Union Army won a victory. And so Lincoln quickly put this into the paper to say, we're going to win the war, and we're going to do that by freeing the slaves. We've just talked about Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, but how did he get to be president in the first place? Right next to it, we have the Lincoln and Douglas debates. Now, these are not the debates, the presidential debates of 1860. These are the debates in 1858 when they were both running for senator from Illinois. Now, at that time, according to the Constitution, senators were appointed by state legislatures. So Lincoln and Douglas were each campaigning to have their party win control of the legislature so they would be able to be the senator. Lincoln, of course, lost to Douglas because more Democrats were elected in Illinois, so Douglas was appointed senator from Illinois. Lincoln, however, planned to run for president. And he was a comparative unknown. He knew that one of the ways that he could get known is to have these debates published. So Lincoln had these debates published. And on the cover it says, "The Life and Public Services of Abraham Lincoln and Hannibal Hamlin," who was his vice presidential candidate in the election of 1860. So this shows you political propaganda, if you will. Again, is another old story. Lincoln knew that if he could get the words of the debate, the way he had defined it, in front of the public, it would help his election campaign, and indeed it did, as he was successfully elected president in 1860. But if you think politics are dirty and vicious today, I recommend you read these debates. They are definitely down and dirty, as Stephen Douglas tries to maneuver Lincoln into being not a defender of the white race. Very interesting how racism was used to attempt to pin Lincoln in a corner with the white voters, because of course blacks could not vote. But Lincoln is strong in his defense of the need for abolition of slavery all through these debates. And that ultimately won him the presidency and later resulted in the Emancipation Proclamation. Next we have another important document advancing the rights of humanity. This is the Constitution of the Pennsylvania Society for Abolition of Slavery. This Constitution was written by Benjamin Franklin. The Founding Fathers have taken a lot of hits over being hypocrites. They owned slaves and yet wrote about freedom. And these are legitimate criticisms of Jefferson and Washington and Madison. But Franklin was always against slavery. He argued vehemently that it should not be in the Constitution, should not be sanctioned by the Constitution. He lost that vote, but he went back to Pennsylvania and he formed this society along with Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, we've already talked about. And Franklin wrote this Constitution, and this became the first abolitionist society in the United States. Thomas Paine wrote an act for the abolition of slavery, which was then passed by the Pennsylvania legislature. And Pennsylvania became the first state in the Union to abolish slavery, officially by legislative act, written by Thomas Paine. The Remnant Trust at IPFW will not go on forever. but the ideas contained in these works most certainly will. I'm Pat Ashton. Thanks for joining me on this tour of the Remnant Trust at IPFW.